Let's roll. Here we go.
Whoa, he has trouble with this. You got barbecue right.
Expectation is greater than the appreciation.
Not just different leagues.
Well, even though it feels as if the season has just begun, the 2025 college football season has already progressed to the halfway point. As with every other week, we have a list of winners, some of which are highly overrated in the AP poll, as well as a list of losers with worth equal to the toilet paper I use right before I take another dump. I live off of Chick-fil-A and Oklahoma fans' will to live, so it won't be long before I have to go to the bathroom again. So unlike Luke Fickell's offense, let's get started. Boy, well, that sure was fun while it lasted. Welcome back to reality. I'm sure this is an unusual feeling for you, but feeling disappointment for your first game with actual expectations is something the rest of us know all too well. You had hopes and dreams of accomplishing something, especially with the most amount of people showing up to witness it firsthand in program history, and what came of it was nothing short of despair and over 500 yards allowed. We knew before this match that North Texas had clear holes on their defensive front. If Army was able to figure out how to offense and then some against y'all, any forward movement is more than enough to overwhelm that turd nugget squad. You carried the fight through one half, but football games aren't 2 quarters. The second half was what we called Drew Messmaker making a massive mess all in his pants. Your defense was already getting submerged by air before, and they didn't need the turnovers to draw them any deeper. You gave them plenty of that, plus whatever else they wanted. And because of that, Alex Golesh gets a statement win, solidifies South Florida further into the playoff conversation, and lands a good old scoregami on their way out the door. Don't let the shafting from the AP poll separate you from the truth about Washington. With the known exception of Ohio State, they are a legitimate force in the conference, enough of a force to outscore the likes of Gregory Schiano, but it's just like South Florida. It took them 2 quarters to realize they out-talent the opposition. Nonetheless, a slow start is better than no start at all. Just again, ask Wisconsin. A 10-0 start for Rutgers, followed by their scarlet blood being thrown all across Husky Stadium. When ref ball wasn't in control, Damon Williams did exactly as he did to most other teams he's fought against. Death by airball. 400 yards passing is more than enough to outdo most teams you play. For added measure, you're on the Big 12 and your defense is in a steaming pile of chlamydia. Athon Krakatoa did his absolute best to mimic the stats, but when you throw 50 bombs a game, 350 plus yards shouldn't be all too much of a shock. Plus, when you spend multiple drives lasting more than 5 minutes that result in dick all, you're expected to come out on the losing end. The Huskies are 5-1, and with Williams on command, they're all the more closer to the days of Michael Pingus Jr. Are the Mariners still playing, by the way? Ever since getting clowned on by the Tank Knolls, Bama has seemingly returned closer to their normal status since. 2 top 15 wins and looking to grab another ranked dub versus Eli Drinkwitz and the Fighting Ahmad Hardys. The name I gave them alone gives Bama the game plan on how to keep Mizzou's offense at bay. Hardy ball being held to minimal yardage left the Tigers with no options other than to summon Penn State backup Beaupre Beulah to sling the football on them. I mentioned Penn State backup as a way to exemplify how that went to shit. While Homer Simpson punched Mizzou in the mouth early, the home crowd being on the Tigers' side this time meant they were not willing to go down like last year. Beulah having a cool thing called dual threat meant they had the advantage Bama lacked, but Alabama in return had something no other team could replicate: the single-time Caden Proctor play. You never know when it's going to show up, but once it does, and if it succeeds, you're pretty much f***ed. Though the Tide had control for most of the brawl, Drinkwitz would not fall that easily. Down by 3, they must let the Penn State quarterback do what a Penn State quarterback does best.
3rd down and 10. Oh, it is intercepted!
Do like Kathleen Kennedy to the Star Wars franchise and ruin everything. If Brady Cook had another year of eligibility, this right here is a playoff contender. But football will not allow the Zoo to be happy for long, especially to the slayer of undefeateds and the Tide.
High tide, guys! High tide! High tide!
Well, it sure was fun, wasn't it, Bruins? You had your moment under the lights and made a new potential clown of the season in the midst of your success. Time for you to fall off again so we don't have to hear any more narratives about how Nico is actually good. Hello? Time to die? What the hell is going on here? There's a marginal chance that this team thought they were in the NFL and considered the first 4 games preseason, because ever since, they've looked like an actual team again. Just as Penn State did the week before, the Spartans got beat down on the big stage by a femboy. It's a sentence I thought I'd never say, but it's the truth. Jerry Neuheisel has been on the warpath ever since the departure of Deshaun Foster, and any coach that's able to make Nico Amidalivia shine is doing a pretty damn good job. There's no other way to describe it than saying that the Bruins locked in. Fraud watch ended and playoff watch has begun. The Spartans will be watching for any quarterback in the portal that can do a cool thing like throw the football. They're running low on options. No need to worry about Jonathan Smith jumping to the Bruins job. They probably don't want him now. You could always get Mel Tucker. Not all programs get rejuvenated following a coaching fire. Even though Stanford actually hasn't fired anyone this season, they're living off of an extended interim coach with the same issues as Belichick. At least here, the only cucking going on is on the field. Kevin Jennings found his swagger against the wall of trees. The offense was running on all cylinders, and they had little way of stopping it or even slowing it down. Ben Gulbranson has improved since his horrific debut, and the run game is at least watchable now. But the trees are off of the Rutgers game plan of wasting everyone's time, including their own, as they'll have multiple drives of 5 minutes or more without actually scoring with it, not even a field goal. In fact, one of these long-ass drives resulted in an SMU touchdown. Not too much progress, huh, Ben? Constantly shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and things like these is what Stanford football is all about. But you're stealing Arkansas's thunder. Stop it. Next time you come onto the field, bring a line that can actually protect something, and maybe you can reach that dream scenario 4-8 over 3-9. Virginia didn't just damage the ability of FSU fans to trash talk, they dropped the collective psyche of the Tank Knowles team. They haven't been the same since. Pitt hasn't been the same either, but with the opposite result. Mason Hines Field, with a name about as Pittsburgh as you can get, has been on a tear ever since he was given the opportunity. The same result can be said here. To outplay Tommy Castellanos at his own game takes some serious skill. Ever since Tommy humbled himself, the team lost all the edge. The Gus Bus offense, despite the seeming loss of edge, kept the Knowles in contention through the game thanks to the efforts of the defensive line keeping Hines Snell running for his life. But the line can only keep that up so many times. Because of offensive stagnation, which I'm sure FSU fans are familiar with, Pitt eventually capitalized on it, got back on top, and sent the Knowles back to the piss realm. Just a reminder that FSU wanted to leave the ACC, and maybe it's for a different reason than money. Thanks to your efforts, Pat Narduzzi's back off the hot seat in a game of Dave Doran-style musical chairs. Reminder, FSU is undefeated versus the SEC, but hasn't won a conference game in over a year. A prestigious rivalry reborn, the Illibuck between Ohio State and Illinois for the right to hoist the most useful turtle in college football at this time of the year. You wouldn't know it, but this is actually the first time Ryan Day comes face to face with the Fighting Illini. But tell me if you've heard this one before. Ohio State talents their way to a win because their iron wall of death known as a defense overwhelmed their opposition by default. Of course you have. It's been their story for the entire season. The Matt Patricia defensive powerhouse was a team obliterating force as always. There were more commercial breaks and a quarter of big noon kickoff than there were successful Illinois drives. Though the silver lining here is that they fought a harder battle than any other opponent the Nuts have battled against. Luke Altmaier gave them a chance to keep fighting, but in order to win a game like this, you have to avoid giving them the short field. And 3 turnovers ensured that it wasn't the case. The Bucknut defensive unit feasted on them to about a quarter of the extent Indiana did. So take that for what it's worth. Ohio State continues to slaughter their competition, and as their prize, earns their 6th win and a bowl bid. We all know they're seeking higher, especially since Indiana seems to be getting all the love. We all know how Cinderella arcs in the Big Ten always end. Was it worth giving up the Gus Bus for this? Was it? Seems you left your ability to score anything back in Lawrence where they too sent you another L. It would have been the perfect opportunity to witness a blowout had Cincinnati not done the same thing and refused to score through most of the contest. Brendan Sorsby looked like he was out there throwing for fun. Likely part of the reason Scott Satterfield got so conservative the moment Cincinnati went up. You might as well have punted the football on first down and waited for UCF to shoot themselves in the foot again. To put into perspective just how miserable their offensive experience was, they needed nearly 40 minutes of possession time to score a single touchdown. Truly a stat that makes you whip out that 2017 national title trophy you don't have. Just like Cam Fancher's consistency. It doesn't exist. UCF is a mess, but it isn't all that surprising considering that just like Fancher, many of these players are struggling to adapt to the Big 12. Story of UCF in its whole. How do Cincinnati fans want themselves to be ranked? This is the furthest thing from ranked football I've seen since Iowa got ranked in the preseason for no reason again. At least Sorsby didn't get the chance to sell this one. Unlike UCF in their situation, Houston has adapted seemingly very well to their new conference. Contribute that to Connor Wegman being a man, or the fact that the man they are playing against is no longer 40. But the Cougars are continuing a reign of somewhat dominance in the conference. They're just like TNT's football broadcasting, surprisingly good. Then again, Oklahoma State isn't a serious program anymore. Their biggest contribution to the college football world this season is a bunch of shirtless dudes in the stands waving towels around. If you want to establish yourself as clown of the season, you might as well make sure you dress up for the act too. The brain-eating amoeba put out a little bit of effort on the field, but even when you put all your cards on the table, it usually results in go fish. Especially when you're playing the quarterback hokey pokey for funsies. Turn around and go home. I don't mean your home, I mean the dumpster next to it. That's your new home until you get a Big 12 win. So I'd imagine we're all under the same belief with this one. Ole Miss was overlooking this game for the Georgia one. Seemed odd already that you have a non-conference game like this in the middle of October. It seemed very odd that the Rebels didn't come out in Oxford and instantly disembowel this sad sap of nihilism. I guess we were all stunned when we remembered Wazzu still had a football team with some backbone. Zevi Eckhouse put the team on his back in this one, having multiple big plays that kept him in the fight. But a lot of the credit goes to the defensive unit for keeping Trinidad Chambliss in check. That all said though, the talent fee eventually cut it and the Rebs fought their way back and over. Ole Miss certainly tried to fall off the face of the earth as a top 5 team, but they are not allowed by the word of Sankey's empire to do that. Yet. Despite nearly pulling a 2024 Kentucky, they hold on and get themselves that smexy 6 win for bowl eligibility.
Different leagues.
So since you were overlooking this one, I'd imagine you're going to go into Athens with everything you got. You better. 33-point favorites, and if not for the worst lateral in history, you could have been the whole circus this week. People always get the name twisted. Some call it Red River Rivalry, some call it Red River Shootout, I call it Red River Shutout, because this game featured so little scoring you could call it my love life. But if you told me which quarterback of the two was going to find their stride in this ball game, I would have looked at you the way Kirk Cignetti did to Penn State when they asked for the job opening. Arch Manning, while nowhere near the quarterback the analysts gargled for an entire offseason, actually performed decently well. Any performance where he doesn't actively screw the team is a good one. If there was anyone actually shooting themselves in the foot consistently, that honor would go to the Boomer Doomers. Let me ask, why the hell was John Mateer playing? He looked like he was playing still broken. You should have thrown him on the bench after one pick, but you left him to suffer against the Longhorn defensive front for the entire length. As such, Mateer left the game with a hand probably more injured than before and conducted the return of the Longhorn narrative. Thanks a lot, shithead. Why Brent Venables made this decision is beyond me, but because of it, for the 3rd time in the last 4 Red River shutouts, Oklahoma has failed to score a touchdown. So much for that number 6 ranking. Seems more dignifying to let Kansas take it from you again. Now that they've taken on the mantle as one of the last living remnants of Tank Conference that's undefeated, Georgia Tech must prove that they are built different. Their schedule is extremely favorable up until that match of Mercedes-Benz at the end of the year, and against a coachless team like Virginia Tech, you can only expect that it was easy pickings for the Jackets. Just as they've done to most of their competition, Tech used the old run the ball until you literally can't trick with Haynes King, and it worked to perfection. Mixing it in with the 200-yard passing game solidified the odds in her favor. What, you think Virginia Tech was going to start scoring too? Kyron Drones fears decent passing games like the program fears Old Dominion. They weren't doing a load of hoo-ha. A new name that has arisen in the Piss Jacket run game is Malachi Hosley. 129 yards on the ground out of 11 carries gives even more weapons to the already powerful Georgia Tech run game. With the rest of the conference blowing themselves up, all Tech has to do is avoid doing the same to themselves, and they've got an easy run to the ACC championship. At least the run to a bowl is complete. Georgia Tech fans remember a time when they weren't even eligible for the toilet bowl. Looking at you, Jeff Collins. If you know this time of year, then you know what time it is. It's time for Maryland to fall apart. No matter how good they were a couple of weeks ago, it's completely irrelevant because the team from yesteryear and the team today are not the same. Or at least that's what I would have said had Nebraska remembered to show up. Matt Rule got a call about some job opening and chose to ignore it by not showing up on the field either. It was one of Dylan Mahomes' ugliest performances. I thought Mahomes had gone up against the Eagles' defense again, because the Turtle secondary picked him off time and time again. If it weren't for Emmett Johnson's run game, the Huskers would have been getting blown to smithereens. Malik Washington did what he needed to at the bare minimum to win the ball game, even with their own run game being missing from action as always. It looks like Mike Locksley can land his signature win, but not before remembering what month it was. The Huskers quickly came back into the brawl, and before regulation could come to a close, they did the funny.
Well, the throws into the flat, caught! Nebraska takes the lead!
It's the first time in what felt like a century where Nebraska went out there and won a football game they probably should have lost. Welcome to their current year. And speaking of the current year, holy shit, they're actually doing it. we're witnessing an entire conference turn on its side because of one man's words from last season. He may not be beating the shit out of top 25 teams, but my lord, they are Googling him tonight. People were quick as always to call the Hoosiers overrated after they disemboweled the Fighting Illini. They ain't got no big win, Squidtard. They gonna get beat down on the big stage like always. Do you believe them now? Or is Oregon now overrated too? The Hoosiers outright dominated them defensively on their own turf. Even with the kind gift of a defensive touchdown, the Oregon offense couldn't do more than quake in horror at the sight before them. Or punt, or fumble, or throw a pick right back to them. The Hoosiers went into Autzen Stadium and stole their valor, hype, and even their uniform combinations. They couldn't steal any bigger title than those because, as we know, Oregon doesn't have any of them outside of the Big Ten title. But even that's meaningless now because it too will belong to a new team in moments' time. This was such a bad beatdown, the Duckies might as well use pieces of their stadium to carve a statue of Cignetti. The college football world is unprepared for a juggernaut Indiana program, but we're nearing its grasp as this continues. Oregon was the last real threat on their regular season schedule. Everything after this is something the second string could tear through in their sleep. Hell, the Indiana teams of old could win some games with what's left. The only thing that stands in their wake now is themselves. If nothing else, enjoy another bowl game. Honestly, now would probably be a good time to give you an award for being playoff bound too. I'll probably be asking myself this until they actually blow a football game, but how in the hell is UNLV undefeated? This team was such a nutcase we wrote them off in week 0, but yet here we are, halfway through the year, and they still won't die. You'd think they'd be able to clear out some lowlifes like a 1-4 Air Force, but if you know UNLV, you know that every game they play will be a 2025 classic. In a very ironic way, Air Force's offensive momentum was on the ground and not through the air. Owen Allen had nearly 200 rushing yards and quarterback Liam Sarka wasn't far behind. UNLV's whole directive was that if you can't stop it, fight back. Thus, they did so through Anthony Calandra shredding them through the skies. An additional 220 rushing yards led to a game where we had 1,000+ yards of total offense. Games like these are always legendary and end like such. But because both teams can't stop each other, it always comes down to the team who scores last. Or better yet, there is an alternative outcome. Chaos overtime as long as Jacob Medina can hit his only field goal of the day.
Snap's good. The kick, he missed it! He missed it!
Another defensive masterclass from Air Force. Sure, I'm glad it's not a representation of our actual Air Force defense. The Rebels may be one of the worst undefeated teams in history, but they are still undefeated. Also, 6-0 and bowl eligible. Excellent job, development. Well, we were all rooting for you, Oregon State. Actually, no, I take it back, I really wasn't doing that. But there was a certain point in the season where you really start to feel some serious pity for teams that aren't yours. They're probably numb to the pain by now, but it doesn't take away from the fact you still have to go out and get embarrassed again. With Robbie Ashford's hand being a victim of the bug, the punishment this week will be less severe. But any quarterback with a working hand will do more than enough to erase you. Deshaun Purdy would get said honor this week, with a 200+ 4-touchdown performance. They didn't even have to put all the weight on Damon Claiborne, and with the opposition's offense being a meme and nothing more, Wait gets themselves another one in the win column. Another week of L's for Oregon State. However, this one is special. It's your 7th loss, which means that you are now officially the first of many teams to get the guillotine. You've been eliminated from a bowl. Get out! We've been telling you all season that you've been flirting with disaster based on how you've been playing. You got your warning last week when Cincinnati got the jump on you. Now who else but Deion Sanders to put the knife in? I don't care how unhealthy you are. Any playoff contender that does this week after week is not a playoff contender and is nothing more than a continuous chokehold on the sanity of the fans who have to watch them. It makes me wonder if they actually practice during the week, because they seemingly get continuously worse as the weeks progress. Even worse for them, Kaidon Salter finally woke up from his slumber and became a quarterback worthy of holding Shedeur Sanders' jockstrap. He obliterated the Cyclones secondary and then some. Seems Iowa State has learned nothing from their past experiences, as the defense isn't any better than it was against Cincinnati, the offense is lobotomized like against Arkansas State, and the Matt Campbell play calling is like he's trying to imitate Chris Kleeman. It's truly an agonizing spectacle for all. It was all highlighted on 3rd and 17 that they will totally stop.
Fence his face, and they do. Go to the air, and Salter connects!
And you guys chose to get mad about that picked up flag. No amount of ref ball can outdo giving up a 3rd and 17. That takes serious skill, or lack thereof. What a disastrous fall off. But trust me when I say it can absolutely get worse. Remember, Oklahoma State started last year 3-0 and they're still waiting to win a conference game since. Wait a second, you're not dead? We saw you get beat down by Army on the big stage, but now you want to have a defensive pulse? Just what are we doing here? Granted, this is what we all wanted. Chaos Conference and full force. TCU looked red hot before this game with an offense that looked unstoppable, but for whatever reason, not only did Josh Hoover play full-on potato, but Matt Wells remembered how to coach an offense worth a little Caesar's pizza. You wouldn't believe it, but turns out letting Avery Johnson do things in his style makes him a pretty decent quarterback. Also, Desmond Purnell single-handedly erased the TCU offense. So something tells me if he keeps that up through the rest of the season, the Wildcats might actually bullshit their way back into Big 12 contention. Anyone has a shot to be something in this conference, and I think we actually believed in TCU to rep the conference the right way. Your job is in the media, not in football. Well, I think it's official, everyone. Penn State has lost the plot. They literally do not care anymore. Who can blame them? If I got the 5-piece combo from Nico of all quarterbacks, I too would forget to care. But it's just not the players who have lost interest, it's the fans too. They were quite literally only in attendance to boo James Franklin. He responded in kind. A complete failure of football on all angles. Drew Aller struggled to complete a pass, the run game was nearly missing despite supposedly having the best running back core in the country, and a once threatening defense has turned into a complete shit stain where their hopes and dreams once laid. Any quarterback game where you get outplayed by Preston Stone is already bad enough on its own. But this was the projected national title winner. My ass. The only thing they're winning is the award for greatest con artist on the planet. You're not even just overrated. You're flat out terrible. A disgrace to Penn State football. The second biggest crisis to happen at the program. What else is there to say? Big Games James Franklin has devolved into Game James. And he's just going to be James before long. Oh boy, it's UNLV squared! Up until this point, Navy has also managed to stay undefeated, but they've done so by the skin of their teeth. Today's edition of that brings a half-functioning Blake Horvath to the table against Evan Simon, who went off on the other side. Horvath being half-functional pertains to his ability to sling the football being washed away for an effective run game. Nonetheless, 300 yards total was enough to keep the battle going for the duration of the game. This was exemplified by a touchdown at the end of the game thanks to the efforts of Horvath running past the entire defense. But in order to avoid even further tomfoolery on their ends, Navy chose to put an end to the chaos by leaving it in the captain's hands.
Horvath keeps it rolling to his right, delivers, and it is caught! Alex Teska!
Thanks to the efforts of Alex Texa and his only reception of the game, the midshipmen, emphasis on mid, once again avoided faith and advanced to 6-0.
Alright!
With games like this, they could end up 12-0 and still be unranked. More of the same here. Notre Dame bullies lower tier ACC teams into death. Notre Dame's schedule is proof that chivalry isn't dead, because they've been gifted wins like this long before anybody can remember. If you ever need a cure for bad defense, whether it's in the form of an injured core the likes of Chris Ash, your ailment has arrived in the form of the Wolfpack. Give them a half to think they have some character development before erasing all shards of happiness in the second half. They were better off walking back home than trying to convert a third down. And since CJ Bailey ain't him, all that followed was a shutout Oklahoma fans can sympathize with. They've imposed their will in the form of the Blue Eyes White Dragon CJ Carr. There's no counter to that. He didn't even have his marquee game and still won with minimal issue. The Irish have to do this against every team they play in order to undo what the first two games they played was. To get an idea of how far back NC State is, Purdue was far more competitive than you were, and they're the worst team from that conference. You don't get your feelings back until the On3 tweet is unsealed, so try and keep your head up high. Behold, the reason Bobby Petrino is being heavily considered for the starting job. I would call this looking ahead to Alabama, but that would require not knowing that Tennessee does this against every SEC team they play. Last year, the defense had to bail out a piss-poor offensive effort, and now here we are in the next season, where Joey Aguilar and company have to bail out a defense simulating a wall made out of toilet paper that breaks before you even wipe. For a supposed playoff contender, there were so many red flags in this game you might as well have painted Neyland Stadium that same color. Remember when Tennessee could actually stop the run? No! Every time Mike Washington got the ball or Taylon Green decided to take off, it was almost painful to watch what happened next. Whoever decided it was a good idea to teach Tennessee defenders to tackle by scooping the legs, they need to be punished through a permanent show cause. You should do it anyway to the entire defensive staff. Is it just too much to ask that we come out and do what we're supposed to do? Thankfully, this is Arkansas we're talking about, so as Arkansas does, They got beat by the Arkansas Razorbacks by pissing the football away on multiple drives, but with 500 yards allowed, this was a game Tennessee almost deserved to lose, but the talent fee hasn't beat the Piggies in nearly 20 years, so take the win where you can get it and move on. And prepare for the trip to Tuscaloosa. I'll be here to take my crew at the same time for next week. Wait a minute. What do you mean it's a night game? Nothing out of the realm of reality here. When you sent Billy Napier, who is still employed by the way, out in back-to-back games against Texas schools, there was no way he was coming out on top in both. He can't even beat other Florida schools. Battered Aggie syndrome was in full force from the start, with Florida's offense doing something through the first half of the ballgame. Lagway was hitting receivers and they were running the ball with efficiency. Marcel Reed was keeping up, but it was too close for comfort. It's moments like these where you have to remind yourself that Florida will, more often than not, find a way to fall off and vanish. Gator fans look at halftime scores like this the same way any normal person would look at a figure in a glass jar. You know something is wrong. That of which it was. A&M's defense came alive in the second half and Florida's offense became utterly useless. Unless the Gators suddenly found a Mario Craver in their depth chart, they weren't doing a load of hoo-ha against the Aggies. Thus, A&M claims their 6th win of the season and remains undefeated.
Alright!
I want you to keep in mind that in 2016, A&M also went 6-0, just to finish 8-5. You're not free from the curse just yet. Just like Florida isn't free from Billy Napier. He's now 0-14 against ranked teams on the road. I'm begging you. Oh, I'm begging you, Scott Strickland. Please keep him around for another year. Please find another excuse. You know you want to do it. The Heartland Trophy, and all the heart was on the side of the Fighting Hawk Tuas. How the hell does Luke Fickell still have a job? Are you still waiting for the offense to wake up? It's never happening. The offensive explosion you're waiting on is literally just them blowing themselves up. 3 first-half turnovers made Iowa's offense look not only competent, but stronger than ever before. How much so? They're now averaging over 30 points a game this season. That stat alone confirms Wisconsin's football program has hit the dumpster on this day. A single cheese curd has more worth than your offense. The 5 seconds of pleasure you get from eating it offer more satisfaction than 4 hours of unwatchable play calling. Remember that one time they were once able to compete on an even level with even talent? I bet Phil Longo does. How did it get worse than that? To illustrate just how disastrous this has been, this is Iowa's first shutout at Madison in almost a full century. It's also the first shutout in Wisconsin since 1980. You threw away that job at Cincinnati for this. There's no I in team, but there's also no W. Paul Christ is laughing at you all right now. One of the most enjoyable but yet recently grueling to watch rivalry games between Georgia and Auburn. A matchup featuring running back Jackson Arnold doing what he does best, running the football. There's always some wild things going on in the Plains, and Auburn going up 10-0 on Georgia is certainly no exception. But we've seen this story all too many times before. Georgia's talent quickly bailed them out and they adapted to Auburn's playbook. To make matters worse, the Tigers had the chance to go up by 2 scores, but a disastrous fumble at the goal line overturned that one. Even though it looked to me and pretty much every other person with a brain that he probably crossed the plane. Yeah, let's cut the bullshit. The barn got absolutely disemboweled by ref ball. What everyone was focused on was the one moment which made everyone look brain dead. Let's get a time lapse, shall we? Kirby Mouse calls a timeout. The officials grant it to him. Before the next play, Kirby runs to the officials to point out that an Auburn safety was clapping, which is an infraction. And for an entirely unknown reason, that was grounds for getting that timeout back. Yeah, I love the rule where that happens. Kirby didn't make himself look any better in the press conference when he stated that he never used a timeout at all, as if cameras aren't on him at every moment. From this point onward, every head coach and referee involved should be required to wear the dunce hat for the rest of the year, including Hugh Freeze. Despite the terrible ref ball through the game, it was not the reason you lost. Having less than 50 total yards and no points in the second half might have something more to do with your downfall. After further review, Auburn still sucks. Great teams find a way to win in spite of bad ref ball. Texas fans last year had a hissy fit which made the officials turn on the dogs, and they still came out winners. You don't deserve to win nor to get the moral victory of the SEC officiating tweet to cover your feelings. Our potential! You got as much potential as Sonic 06. That doesn't make you a good football team. But if you're looking for a moral victory, I'll give you one. This was indeed one of the worst moments in officiating I've ever witnessed. So even though ACC refs exist, the SEC refs deserve the first edition of Ref Ball Clown of the Week. Maybe this will be enough to buy another week for Hugh Freeze. Clemson football may be dead at the current moment, but don't get it twisted. They are not in hell. Here's someone who is. No amount of incompetent ref ball in the ACC was saving you from this ass whooping. Cade Klubadix had himself a day if you remove the absolutely brain-dead interception he had. The Taters racked up 500 yards of offense on Boston College with no sign of slowing down. It sure does look competent now that they're back to playing piles of aids for football teams again. Boston College is so absolutely doomed. Bill O'Brien is getting closer each day to turning into O'Reilly, the one that sells auto parts more specifically. The only bright spot this year is Turbo Richard, but there's no telling how long it'll be before him and Dylan Lonergan hit the portal. Clemson gets themselves a much-needed dub, but in the process, potentially loses Klubnik for some period of time. Christopher Fazina has shown that he has no clue where he's at on the field, so the need for your starter back is very vital. The only silver lining is that you are no longer on par for clown of the season. Good lord, what an absolute mess this was. Having to watch this game unfold would make anyone cringe. Minnesota, even against the Soilermakers, got beat at their own game. They got outrushed by a margin of 253-30. Purdue went up and down the field in the boat rowers, but the issue was in regards of who they were. Purdue. Once they actually got into scoring position, more often than not, they'd flop all over themselves and blow up. Ryan Brown and turnovers, a match made in hell. 460 total yards of offense and not even 30 points to show for it. Minnesota's defense is out here carrying the entire load, and as you're about to find out, they make Purdue's load blow up all over themselves.
Brown on first down, it's intercepted. Coy Parrish. It's a homecoming house call.
Coy Parrish is a grown man. He's also the best shot PJ Fleck has of getting out of 7-5 hell. Row the boat away from a waterfall. Whatever you want to say about Ohio State in regards to their dominance all over the Big Ten, that and more applies to Texas Tech. Business as per the usual for the defense that's been beating down every poor sad sap quarterback that's been trotted out against them. Jalen Daniels having legs was about the only reason why Kansas was able to outscore all of Texas Tech's previous opponents. He had negative 13 rushing yards, but keeping Tech on their toes is far better than anything previous. But 17 points is futile in an effort to keep the fight alive. The game was already set in the first quarter. From there, it was slow annihilation. The only thing keeping Tech from scoring 50 a game was their red zone consistency. It's decent, but sometimes problematic. But as a Red Raider fan, you really need to slap yourself in the face if you have any legitimate complaints. You're 6-0, own the Big 12, and bowl eligible. Enjoy these moments. You're still in the Big 12. Always remember that. You literally never know when your team, as well as your overinflated aspirations, will come crashing down. I have a lot of questions. From what both of these teams have shown so far through the year, I would have expected an outcome far different from what was presented. First off, where and how did USC get their defense back? We saw it collapse earlier in the year and now they have a dominant run again. Moreover, where and how did Michigan's offense die again? It was running so well these past few weeks. Bryce Underwood actually looked like he knew how to throw the football again, but now it's right back to 13 points a game. Even Dave Portnoy said USC was soft. The only thing soft in this game is the Wolverine defense. 500 yards of offense allowed. Plus the run game, ever since it was promoted on the cover of the video game, has turned into a complete joke. It doesn't help that this happened to Justice Haynes. But even with that injury, when is the Wolverine man ball gonna come back? Sharon Moore said the Coliseum was sold out because of Michigan fans, and all the ones who did attend had to deal with this vomit you call offensive momentum. I guess the ultimate question above all others is, when will both extremes return? Michigan's offense having some life again, and USC's defense vanishing from reality. I guess one thing is answered. Want Michigan to lose? Send them out west. Well, so much for vengeance after last season, huh? At least ref ball didn't give you the screw, but rather yourselves. I keep asking myself when you're going to do something important for once, but it appears to be the same cycle on repeat for the Cogs. What better way to exemplify that by letting an overrated quarterback beat up on an even further overrated quarterback? I can't say wash because that would imply they actually had a moment of glory. Nussmeier won the day for the Cajun Tigers, but terrible picks and bad reads prove he's not much different from Lenora Sellers. Speaking of which, all this man ever did through the day was run around and get sacked. He's like Jalen Milroe if Milroe held onto the football for the entire game. The real offensive hero was Damian Ramos. He was the only guy you can actually count on to do his job. So thanks to him and BK doing nothing except for staring into space, LSU claims another dub and a possible spot in the Citrus Bowl. Shane Beamer has already started the coat train by mentioning how Carolina was also 3-3 last season and yet they won out. Yeah, right, buddy. Let's see how you match up to that comment once a one-handed John Mateer outplays Sellers. Gotta love Mike Shula, huh? When the sun goes down and the darkness takes the air, the Mormons come out to feast on whatever poor soul the schedule whips up for them. Said feast would be in the Desert Cats of Arizona. The Bear went to work early, consuming away at the opposition in record time. But as this season has already shown us, Arizona is undergoing a renaissance in the form of a backbone and realization McMillan isn't around to bail them out of every offensive mistake. Noah Fafita undergoing a massive character arc was the main attribution of that. So while the Cougars did their best to put the ball game out of reach, Arizona fought back tooth and nail to ensure BYU would have to fight harder than ever to ensure their undefeated season. Zona did their best to keep the Cougars from making a return, but as luck would have it, BYU would once again use the powers of Big 12 bullshittery to cut the lead and get back in it. Thus, there would be some chaos overtime after dark. Once overtime came, the Cats and Cougars kicked back-to-back field goals before a second overtime, which then resulted in the Bear putting the team on his back again with a touchdown to go up. But with a missed two-point conversion, it was up to the defense to protect their season. It was at this particular moment in time where Zona wished they still had McMillan around.
Fafita steps up in the pocket, launches, and the game is over!
Despite the blown lead, it wasn't blown enough on their ends, and the Mormons prevailed to 6-0 with a bowl on the horizon.
All right!
Many still ask if BYU is a pretender or a contender. Many of those questions will likely be put to the test against their opposition next week, which you'll hear about right now. This was absolutely no contest from the start of the ball game, not because of anything Utah did, but rather what Arizona State had to do. With Sam Leavitt no longer being an option for the time being, the Sun Devils had to look in their bag of quarterbacks to find the right guy for the job tonight. That would go to Jeff Sims. You cannot be serious. Are we oh my god. What? No, really, what the hell did you think was gonna happen? This guy has been under the lights for a decade now and never did anything outside of consistently giving the ball back to the other team. The offense was drier than the desert they live in because of it. All the more reason tonight being the night that the defense caves would result in the worst possible outcome for Arizona State. The Devils got erased from this dimensional plane, proving that losing Cam Skibbity has left a similar impact to them as Genty Ball's departure did for Boise State. The Utes having an offense again has once again made them contenders for the conference title. While they don't have a Lincoln Riley to teabag, game day will be missing out on a very toxic holy war coming up very soon. And that's another week in the books. Winners, losers, and outright potatoes as always were in order. Speaking of potatoes, here's your latest version of the Squidtard Top 25. Blah blah blah, wah wah wah, this team is better than that team, I already know. Whatever you're here to complain about, whether it's this or your own team's shortcomings, thank you for taking the time to watch as always. But before we call it a video, we have to say our final goodbyes to a few more familiar faces, some of which are very well known. This is a little bit more of a grind than at Lipscomb, I'm sure you found out. Bill Clark laid out the groundwork for building sustainable success, and how else to piss all over it by bringing in a buddy severely underprepared for the grind at hand. A 5-14 conference record is identical to Hugh Freeze, but you don't have the excuse of the conference grind like the SEC does. UAB was just never able to do anything significant. They were uncoordinated, unprepared, and moreover, just hilariously undercoached. There's been moments where the 2015 UAB squad was better, and they didn't even exist! He'll make for a great analyst with Steve Sarkisian or Ryan Day, but your departure was long overdue as it was a reach from the very beginning. Trent Dilfer? I can understand why they waited as long as they did. They wanted to see if maybe there was some sort of turnaround before the end of the season. But after becoming the very first team in the FBS to be eliminated the losing way, it was clear to everyone what needed to be done. Bray was like the program and the conference they resided in. They all fell together, holding hands in a massive explosion of talentlessness. Oregon State was in such a bad position when they brought you on as the head coach that you were simply a promotion. I thought Bray had more than enough time to understand the system, and while he might have, he never could do anything with it. Worst part is, the program is stuck with an AD outdone by the hologram of Lou Holtz, so whatever comes after this is likely not going to be any better. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I doubt it. Nonetheless, while he was a great player for Oregon State, that doesn't always equal a great head coach. Trent Bray? And here we are. I never thought I'd see the day, especially not this soon. It was just 7 games ago we saw this man coaching for the opportunity to play in the national championship. He came into this year with a known ultimatum: win big or lose bigger. Oregon dug their grave, UCLA buried him in it, and Northwestern took a mighty piss all over it. This was the ultimate curse of James. He couldn't even win the big games, and once it got to a point where he couldn't win games in general, it was already over. Plus, this was supposed to be the team, projected by many outlets to outright win the national title. What a complete and utter failure. Penn State was never going to get to that happy place with you as the coach. Don't feel bad for James though. While he may be a meme for generations, he'll leave the Nittany Lions with $50 million in his pocket. Second most to old Jimbo. It's been fun, and it's probably not the last we'll see of you, but to you, Mr. James Franklin, I say...
Okay, any particular play that you're going to run that we should look out for?
We're probably going to run the 6-6 wombat, 42 jet left, pie, slide ruler, lightning 6, stubble smoke, ukulele.
Okay, ukulele, correct?
Wait a second. There's a guy over here who's not in uniform. It's supposed to be here. I got to go. Hold on.
Coach. That's too fast.